Welcome to the Orange Couch Talks, a deeper dive from our leaders into our recent teachings.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Orange Couch Talk. We've been on a break for a little while, and the cool thing is during this time we've launched into a new series called Love Songs Volume 2. It was a series that we had kicked off back before COVID, that COVID kind of interrupted. So now we're back to wrap it up. We've been in that series for a couple weeks discussing marriage, romance, relationships. And one of the things that comes along with relationships, whether romantic or not, there tends to be some conflict, right? Everybody's got conflict in their relationships. And especially whenever it's somebody you care about, that conflict can really affect you and get you fired up. So, we want to talk a little bit today about fighting.
Yeah, we do that amongst ourselves pretty well.
No, we don't.
No, I do. Yeah, I think it's a big part of the married experience, right? Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
Would
absolutely.
Sarah agree with that?
Very much so.
Okay. Oh, by the way, for those watching from Surprise, your wife is with child.
Yeah. She's pregnant.
Is it
not
yours?
We.
I mean, it's not. It's not both.
We're not pregnant, but
yeah.
she is pregnant. I am the father.
Yeah.
This is kid number 3, due in September. So
very
that's
good.
Super
Congratulations.
exciting.
Thank you.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's going to be, come September, we're going to have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn. So prayers are appreciated.
Oh man, there's going to be a lot of fighting then.
Yeah.
For sure. Between you guys and probably between the children.
Yeah, we're just going to put them in a room and say, go for it. Just raise yourselves.
So, probably shouldn't discuss parenting tips right now based on that statement.
That
but when it comes to conflict, I mean, Pastor Jack, you've been married longer than me and Andrew combined, so I'm sure there's some sage
I think
wisdom.
I've been married longer than you are been
Yes,
alive.
that's what I was going to say.
Probably so.
No, it's not probably.
How many years?
Definitely so.
Now that's a bad question to ask in front of a national-wide audience. But more than 30, and you guys are 30 and 29.
I'll be 30
so
next month.
It's more than 30. I know that. So,
Okay, 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So as far what's some valuable things you've learned when dealing with conflict? I mean, you're still married after 30 plus years, so you've obviously learned how to navigate some of this well.
Duck. Yeah.
Done. Let's just wrap this one up. We're good.
Yeah. No, I think we said this weekend at the Surprise campus that we're all going to go through seasons of conflict in marriage. Whether you're a pastor, I think we have this sort of ivory tower opinion of pastors that we go home and we teach an extended Sunday school class and have communion together and then go to bed.
You guys don't do that.
But everybody is going, pastors, parishioners, whoever, are going to go through seasons of conflict. We're always going to have conflict, and I think some of those, there's going to be more intense seasons because of pressures, because of immaturity, because of we had another child, and we've got to adjust to a new sort of pecking order in the home, and there's more responsibilities to be spread out. So I think we're all going to go through that. I said our marriage, early in our marriage, we went through a lot of fighting. And a lot of that was immaturity, but a lot of that was we needed to get to know each other. There was also a lot of stress during that time because of we were dirt poor, and we were trying to start a home together. And I was going through college, and Tanya was babysitting like 6 or 7 kids in our house, and I had 2 or 3 different little side jobs plus a pastoral job that I was doing, and trying to take a full load of classes, and so there was just a lot of stress. I mean, external stress and pressures always sort of heighten, I think, the level of fighting. But I think it was good. We learned how to fight fair, and healthy couples fight fair. Unhealthy couples fight dirty. Healthy couples fight so that both sides win. Unhealthy couples fight so that one side wins, and if one side wins, well, somebody else is losing, and if somebody else is losing in a marriage, then both of you are losing.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that helps when it comes to fighting fair versus fighting dirty is remembering that, like, your spouse isn't out to get you. Right? I mean, you come home and I hope your spouse isn't out to get you. But I mean, like, you know, they loved you enough to say yes forever, right?
Yeah.
And so, but for some reason, we can distort that, well, they love me, so they should know that they shouldn't have phrased that way, or that I'm tired when I come home from work. And so we twist statements around to be some horrible assault on us. Whatever. I mean, most of the time, it was just a sentence, a word that was said. So it's good to walk into conversations assuming that they aren't really trying to ruin your day or to rock your self-esteem or to hurt your feelings. And that's a good starting place.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, the people that presumably we love the most, we spend the most time with, our spouse is the one that we end up, you know, being the most critical of or fighting with the most. Sarah was in my office this past week in a counseling session, and she was telling me about your problems in your home. I mean,
this is all made up.
I'm kidding, Sarah. Sarah knows I'm kidding.
She's
Nobody
not
else does. But yeah, I'm sure you guys love each other, but you fight, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we said it again this week. What we've kind of been echoing. It's not, you need to be prepared, not for when you're going to fight, but just knowing that it's going to come and how to brace yourselves and having those guardrails too. And I like how you said, usually that person you love the most, sometimes that's who we're most critical of, or that's who we fight the most with. I think one mistake we can make, and that we didn't really get into as much this week, is we take a lot of the stresses externally from life and then we like unload that on our spouse. So instead of it being like, let's vent and let's talk about our problems, it becomes like, we get just angry, and then we take that anger to our spouse instead of saying, these are all the stresses I'm dealing with at work, or I'm stresses I'm dealing with in whatever other area, and let's discuss these, and like, let's love each other through these, instead of like picking a fight with your spouse when they had nothing to do with your crappy day at work.
Yeah. And it's not always like, I think that's a good point. It's not always directed to the spouse. I mean, she or he isn't the source of the conflict, but they're kind of the recipient of the stuff. We talked a little bit this weekend about how different people are in how they respond to that. I mean, some people blow up, other people clam up. Curious, in your home, who blows up, who clams up? Who's the, and another way of saying that, who's the external processor and who's the internal processor?
So I am definitely the external processor.
That surprises me.
Really?
Yeah, I figured Cody would be like, wow.
No, Cody, I remember when me and Cody first got married.
Because she's a very extroverted person.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in my house, I mean, both of my parents were external processors, so I just grew up around that. So I was like, okay, you get frustrated, you talk about it. And so when we first got married and had our first disagreement, you know, I was like, well, what's going on here? And she curled up in a ball and cried on the floor. And I was like, this isn't how this works. I thought, like, what do you do about this?
Stop crying about it. Get up
No crying in baseball.
That didn't work. That method didn't work. And so I remember, like, you know, after like spending time like with us learning each other and me just reassuring, like, it's okay for us to disagree. We still love each other. I remember, like, it was probably a year later, we got frustrated about something, and she yelled, and I was like, hold on, pause. Give me a high five. Good job. And so we high fived each other. I was like, all right, unpause. Don't yell at me. And then we just argued. But it was wonderful that we had grown to the point that she was comfortable enough to process in that way. And, you know, part of all that, I mean, we all bring our baggage in from our life before we were married, right? And we get married, and this wedding ring adds a level of security that you didn't have before in relationships, right? Now, this person legally is stuck with me right now. And so I tell people, you put the wedding ring on and there's a crazy you that you didn't know existed because you always kept that person inside. But now that somebody's committed to you, crazy you comes out. And we say things to our spouses that we would never say to anybody else. We act ways with our spouse that we would never act with anybody else. And part of that security is a rewarding thing because you feel safer, you feel more comfortable. But there's also the dangerous side of it too, that I got to make sure not only do I allow that security to make me feel comfortable, that I also leverage that security to love my spouse better. And sometimes that means I got to pay attention to what I say and how I act.
Yeah. How about you guys? Who's the internal versus external processor in your relationship?
Sarah's very internal, and then and this is what I've learned in my marriage.
And that doesn't surprise me because I talked to Sarah once.
Once, yeah.
Her and I get along great because we don't talk a lot, and so
she's definitely
quiet.
a little more introverted than myself. And I've learned, like, one of the big things for me is, like, I had to fight and argue so much differently than I do normally in other areas of my life. And some of this is I just need to become a jerk, less of a jerk in all areas. But, like, when I get in an
That's
argument,
a breakthrough right there.
Yeah,
this is pretty good.
But when I get an argument,
argument,
and I've always done it, grew up with 2 older brothers, so, like, I think I kind of learned that. But even through school, is when I see a fight, I see, okay, what's my path to victory? So I started doing research. I started building my case. I started making my arguments. And I got in marriage and realized when I brought to her, I'm like, okay, here's why you're wrong. Didn't go over so well. And I'm like, clearly, look at the facts. I'm the winner of this argument. And it didn't end nicely. So it's like having to shift how I do that. And it's like, it's not about winning the argument, but it's about us reconciling together and moving forward and presenting those of, like, okay, here's what I believe or here's what I think, but what do you think? And it's just that shift.
One of the great quotes I heard years ago about this is that maturity is getting to the place where we value the relationship more than we value being right. And man, I want Tanya to stay with me. Because we all know that I'm right, right? Just going into the argument, there's a given, right?
I wonder if whoever made that quote said that to win an argument one time. Hold on, I'm going to value this relationship over us being right or wrong.
And then
clearly I'm right.
Probably thought I'm right anyway.
Everybody says my quote, so I'm right. So.
But but there is a level of maturity. Is like, I could argue all day that I told you this and you told me I didn't tell you this, and I just know I did, so I'm not going to argue about it anymore. I'm just going to love you. And it's the little silly things like that we fight over, right? It's like, you didn't tell me. Like, yeah, I did. You just weren't listening, or you were on your phone, or whatever. Subliminally giving Tanya messages through this entire process. Yeah, we'll probably fight about this. But yeah, value the relationship, man. That is more important than winning the argument.
Here's my next question, and I think I've seen this a little bit in ours, but I've been married for about 7 years. You've been married for 7 times 70 or something. Not quite that long, but longer than we've been alive. But one of the things I love, and one of the best books on marriage is that I recommend all the time, is Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller. And one of the things that's so powerful he says in there is that the longer you're married, he's like, you need to be prepared that you're marrying different people, meaning you're going to change. And it's like, you've been married for 40 years. You've really been married to 7 different people in that 40 years, and you've become 7 different people because you change over time. So in those seasons, as you've been married a long time, have you had to change the way you guys fight through that process? Have you, as you've changed, you feel like it's changed the style?
We fight a lot less now.
That's good.
I mean, you just don't. You get my age, you don't have the energy to fight.
You're like,
let's just go to bed.
It's not worth it.
But I do agree with that. People are going to change during the process. I mean, the only thing that doesn't change is something that's dead, right?
Yeah.
So living things are always changing things. We are Americans. We talk about the Declaration of Independence. But there really needs to be a declaration of dependence, that I depend on you, and then also a declaration of acceptance, that I accept you, and here's the key, as you are and however you become. And I preached this years ago, at that concept years ago at a church, and a guy came up to me. His wife is actually my admin assistant, and he's gone on to be hugely successful. He wrote an article on the front page of Wall Street Journal, all this stuff. But he came up to me and he said, Pastor, do you mean if my wife does this, this, and this, and I won't tell you the shallow kind of things that he were talking about with his wife, like if she doesn't take care of her body this way, I have to continue to love her? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, you have to. she's going to have some of your babies, and her body's going to change, and she's going to go through menopause, and there's going to be changes. You're going to change. Hair's going to fall off of your head and attach to your back, and it's
even when you're young.
It's just there. We have to decide right now. That's the huge thing about the marriage covenant, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I'm deciding right now that I'm going to love you as you are, however you become. And here's the really crazy thing. How I love my wife is going to really determine the kind of person she becomes. Mm-hmm. So the more I love her well and accept her and give her space to become what she wants to, God has designed her to be, the easier it's going to be to love her later, because when you love her well here, she's going to grow into this person that is the person that you'll want to love later.
And I love it. I've heard in
you
counseling.
Love that? There's a lot of love in the
air. That was good. What you said, but I've heard in counseling sessions before and I think this is a popular phrase we've heard in TV shows and movies and things before. It's like, well, he's not the person I married.
Sure.
It's like, yeah, you're right, and you're not either.
And be thankful for that.
Yes, I'm like, I don't want to be the same stupid kid that got married at 22.
Exactly.
When, 10
My
years
wife
later.
is hugely thankful that I'm not the person she married. She shaped me and molded me, and now I'm a different guy. That I was a project, and like, and now it's better. But yeah, be thankful for that, because that would be like we're married to like really immature 50-year-old people.
Well, and I think some of it, we've talked about this, I think, way before, but like somewhat controversial is, I think you've said this before, and I agree, that not believing in soulmates, really. And sometimes how Hollywood talks about like soulmates, these people are made for each other, they're perfect for each other. And it's like, but going into marriage knowing we're both broken, jacked up people, but I believe if we depend on God and look to Him, then we can keep going forward. We can keep loving each other the right way, not because we're a perfect fit, but because we're dependent on God and we're broken people, and He shows us how to love each other correctly.
Yeah, and that's, centered around that that comment, which is controversial in some people's eyes, is the whole premise that love is an act of the will, not just a disease that we catch. Mm-hmm. Like, I choose to love this person, and it's an act of my will. And so 10 years later, if you get a divorce, just know it wasn't a disease that you got over and now you can get rid of. You're choosing not to love that person anymore. It's an act of your will to love them or not to love them. And I think that is in many ways much more powerful than like I caught a cold at the restaurant where I met this blind date, and I just fell head over heels and like, oh, there's just all this chemistry. Well, chemistry changes, and but your will stays consistent. And I think it's more powerful to me say, I choose to love. And now there's a lot of things about my wife when we were married or we were getting married that attracted me to her. Clearly, there's that aspect of it. But as someone said, one of my favorite pastors of many years ago, is that one of the first things that will attract you to your spouse is their beauty. But beauty is only skin deep, right? Of course, ugly runs clear to the bone, so you got to watch out for that. But
we'll edit that
I've been wanting to use that one. That's an old one. But if all you have is physical attraction, you don't have much, because that will go away.
Yep.
Well, in the book,
not completely away. Just
on the man side is what we're saying.
Yeah.
In the book, Saving Your Marriage Before It Begins, the author writes about how healthy love requires three things. It requires physical love, which is more than just sexual, but, sitting with each other, spending time in proximity to each other, holding hands, hugging each other. It also requires intimate love, which was an emotional friendship, kind of like how well do you know the person? Are you engaging and spending time with them? Are you getting to know them better, learn more about them? And then the last thing was committed love, that you have to make that choice, that in order for a true relationship to develop, you've got to be committed to go through the challenging times. And praise God that's how He loves us. That He loves us to get us through all our challenging moments. And that's what we need in order for marriage to really become what it can be. It's got to weather those difficult times.
And maybe we can kind of pull to conclusion here, but there's so much on the other side of that is so rewarding when you kind of recognize, your spouse maybe recognizes your brokenness, and then they accept you in spite of it. I grew up in a sort of a legalistic background concerning church in Oklahoma. Started pastoring when I was 18, 19 years old. And in those early seasons of my pastoral life, really until I was 40, to be honest with you, I had this sort of perception of perfection. Okay? Because you're the pastor, and I pastor in small towns in Oklahoma, so you're kind of never off, the clock. And so you go to a ball game, there's just this regal presence that you walk into because you're the pastor of the First Baptist Church or whatever. You have a perception of perfection. And unfortunately, I carried that home with me. And, my kids grew up, unfortunately, if I had a do-over, that would be one of the big do-overs in parenting, to pull that facade of perfection down. But I won't get into a lot of detail, but I had a season in my life after 40, we'd moved to Arizona, and I had a failure in my life that my family, my wife discovered and my kids discovered. And it was, the perception of perfection was gone. Right? It's like, this guy is a real guy. He has stuff in his life. He's broken. He's a sinner. And I don't even know if I've ever even told Tanya this. I probably should have told her this before we recorded this. Sorry.
Okay. Now she has it on tape forever.
But my level of love for my wife in watching her forgive me of something, like before I'm like, yeah, she has to love me. I'm perfect. Right? Why wouldn't she? I mean, she's got the perfect person. And when that perception of perfection failed, and then I saw her step in and love me in spite of my flaw, I'm like, oh, why would I want anybody else in my life? This person loves me and knows me. To be loved and to be fully known is a pretty good place to be. I mean, fully known, like he or she knows all of my stuff. Is a great place to be. And so for couples out there that are maybe young in marriage or fighting through stuff, I would say to you, it's worth the fight. As my friend Brian in the video we piped in said, it's worth every brokenhearted day. It really is worth the fight. And there's going to be a tipping point in that fighting and in that relationship where you become fully known and in spite of that fully loved.
Yeah.
And man, I wish that for you. I hope you can get there. I would say fail faster, so that you can get to that point where you know that you're fully known and fully loved, and you have to reciprocate that too, right? I have to fully know my spouse's failures, because guess what? As we said Sunday and Saturday, your spouse is a sinner, and you're a sinner, and it's not just you that has a sin problem. Your spouse has a sin problem. There's some things that you have to forgive in their lives. But man, when you reach that tipping point that you realize we're flawed people, fully loved by God. That's how God loves us, right? I mean, God, I think, knew I wasn't perfect before I was 40.
Pretty sure he had that figured out.
Before you were 40, so you are now.
No, he knows I'm imperfect now.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Everybody knows it now. I mean, the cat is out of the bag. But God knows our imperfections and yet loves us.
Yep.
And man, isn't that where it ought to work in our relationships? That we know each other's imperfections, we fight through it, we conflict fairly and correctly, but we're fully known, fully loved. Hey, until next time, I wish you the greatest of success in your marriage and your relationships. Pray for us, because we all got to go home and apologize for our spouse for stuff that we said today. But until next time, have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and don't forget to go out and make Jesus known.